When we begin to analyze in a timed writing, or any writing for that matter, we have a tendency to use the word shows. We want to say things like the author shows or this quote shows. And I really believe that using the word shows takes you down a path where you're going to summarize what that quote says instead of analyzing what that quote says. So I think that like eradicating shows from your writing, at least in your analytical writing, is really the best bet. There are plenty of words that you can use in place of shows, and this is just some of them. And I think that if you use, for example, clarifies, or which is on there twice on accident, or depicts, or interprets, or details, or highlights, or proposes, I think that those words will lead you not to a summary of the quote or a summary of the passage, but they'll lead you more toward analysis of the passage. So I highly recommend this list of words or a word that isn't on this list but is similar to these words. Let me give you some examples. So we've got the quote, and then we've got the following quote with shows, which will lead to summary, and then we've got following quotes with other verbs that can lead to analysis. And each of the sentences that I have below have their own slide. So if you don't have enough time to read them now, that is okay, because we will move on to the third slide where you will see the first quote. So this guy named Jean Baudrillard said, "We live in a world where there is more and more information and less meaning." So if I were to ask you to interpret that quote, using shows would lead you toward not interpreting it, but telling me what the quote means. For example, this quote shows us that Baudrillard is concerned with the meaning of information and how, even though we have more of it, we can't trust it. So remember your audience. I'm your audience. So do I know what that quote says? Of course I do, right? I'm older than you. I've been teaching for a long time. I've heard that quote before, so I understand what the quote says. What I don't know is how you interpret that quote and how you will, if this were an essay, how you would be linking that quote to whatever analysis and whatever thesis statement that you have. So here's one that uses the word proposes in place of shows. This quote proposes that Baudrillard understands how difficult it is to interpret as much information as we now have. Therefore, because we can't trust the information, we can't get the meaning or the truth. I think that sentence, or those two sentences rather, are way more analytical than the sentence that used shows. So, bottom line, use shows as little as you can and replace it with words like on the second slide that will lead you down a more analytical path.